And welcome back to another episode of Watching the Meta, the weekly series where we take a look at the Magic Online challenge data for Modern, Pioneer, and Standard. We take a look and see what the metagame looks like compared to last week, see if there's any metagame trends that maybe we can take a look at, what to look forward to for next week, and then at the very end of each segment, we go through the top 32 and we try and find some of the spicier deck lists that people decided to bring. But before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com. If you guys want to buy any Spider-Man pre-orders, be sure to head over to CoolStuffInc.com. Be sure to use promo code DOOM at checkout to get yourself 5% off of your order and a free exclusive Rhino token while supplies last. Cool Stuff Inc. They got cool stuff, and they got it in stock. And with that out of the way, let us begin, as we always do, with Modern. And Modern is very important this week because for those of you who don't know, there's a Pro Tour this weekend. And the Pro Tour happens to be, you guessed it, Modern. So it'll be very interesting to see what the metagame breakdown looks like. I mean, as you can see here, this is what we're looking at for the Modern challenges. Not really a ton of changes, like Boros slightly up, Etron slightly down, Belcher slightly up, Domain Zoo slightly down, Affinity slightly up. Those are kind of like that, and maybe Espergorios, which is down a little bit. Those have been the 5 or 6 more played decks, definitely more represented. But there really isn't anything like completely egregious. Maybe you could argue that Boros Energy at 17.9, maybe that's a little too high, but I mean, as far as if you're trying to compare it to the other metagames, certainly better than the other ones that are available. We'll get to that later. But, you know, as far as big movers this week, I guess Amulet Titan and Gruul Eldrazi had some pretty good weekends. I don't really know exactly, like I've been paying attention to and playing Modern for a decent amount over the past couple of months. Even though I don't play it as much on stream, I still like to keep up with it. It's really hard to determine what the metagame is going to look like. Not sure if any of the Pro Tour teams, maybe they broke it, maybe they found something that nobody else has found. I think if I had to take an educated guess, I would say sort of the decks that have a reasonable matchup into Boros, like Mono Blue Belcher, Amulet Titan, Neo Brand, I would maybe expect a bit of a resurgence in those decks. Maybe some more of the unfair side of things, because that's what Boros usually struggles with. But other than that, I mean, I do think that the Pro Tour is going to be a very, very fun watch because the metagame is super wide open. There's not really one completely dominant deck, and I'm very excited to go ahead and do that. We're going to be doing a watch party on the live stream on Twitch if you want to check that out this weekend. But with all of that, let's take a look and see if we can find some spice, shall we? Okay, now I wouldn't necessarily call this spice, but I did want to highlight this for one thing and one thing only. This is from Morris in 8th place. This is Boros Energy. Most of these cards, if you've seen a Boros Energy deck in Modern, you've seen all these cards before. The one thing I wanted to highlight is Nova Hellkite. This is not the only list I've seen with Nova Hellkite. I saw a couple in League Dumps. I think there might have been one other challenge where Nova Hellkite was appearing, and it seems to have replaced the Fable of the Mirror Breakers. So I'm not entirely sure if Nova Hellkite is better than Fable of the Mirror Breaker. I think that there are certainly pluses and minuses. This card seems pretty good in the mirror because it kills Ocelot Pride. Although it doesn't, I guess it kills Ragavan too. And more importantly, it has haste to be able to attack down their Ajani the turn they flip it. So I'm not sure. This is definitely something that I want to try leading up to the regional championship in Houston that I'm going to be attending, which is also Modern. But yeah, just wanted to kind of show the sort of different 3-drops in it. It seems like people are not necessarily determined on which 3-drop is the best. Here we have a blink list from Ganache1127 in 21st place. So if you have been watching the channel over the past couple of weeks, I've been really kind of showing the sort of evolution of these different blink decks. There's sort of this trend where it seems like a lot of the blink decks are just cutting most of the blink cards, and they're sort of slimming down the blink package to a very, very small subset of cards. The 12 cards that basically always show up is 4 Riddler, 4 Solitude, 4 Ephemerate. This list also features 3 Subtlety, although Subtlety not quite as good with Ephemerate. But you don't see any of the Overlord of the Belmerks, Felias, Flicker Wisps, any of that stuff. We're basically just making the blink package as small as possible to include more just individually good cards. Psychic Frog, Teferi Time Raveler, more good interaction like Force of Negation, 4 Wrath of the Skies main deck, Thoughtseize. So a little bit of a different take on the Esper Blink deck, and I'm very, very high on both Riddler and Ephemerate in Modern in general, and I'm definitely going to be trying out more of these Blink shells, doing testing for Houston for sure. And speaking of Blink shells, what if we just took the blue-white cards and we added Blage? And that's what Mav807 did in 7th place here. So as I mentioned, Quantum Riddler, Solitude, Ephemerate, there's your Blink package. You don't really have to lean too much else into it. This particular person is using Felia, which is a combo with Riddler, because you can turn 2 the Felia, and then turn 3 warp the Riddler, attack with Felia, flicker the Riddler. But Felia also offers some additional utility, where you can blink stuff like Seasoned Pyromancer. If you have a Solitude with an Ephemerate, you can blink that. But then more importantly, you're playing Consigned to Memory, and this is something that the Esper Blink deck can do too, because it is a blue-white deck. But if you Felia their creature, the Felia has a delayed trigger at the end step, which says return the card to the battlefield under its owner's control, right? So if you Felia Blink their thing, it creates a trigger in the end step, and if you consign the Felia trigger to return their thing, it just stays exiled forever. So it kind of turns Felia into this like weirdo removal spell, which I find kind of interesting. You can also consign the warp trigger, the end step warp trigger, to keep the Riddler in play. And yeah, red also gives you access to stuff like Pyromancer and Flage. Pyromancer is really, really sick with Ephemerate, especially when you're trying to fill your graveyard for Flage. It just sort of lets you dump a whole bunch of resources in there. And then Ragavan, I'm not entirely sure how good Ragavan is in the format right now, because I still don't think it's that good against Boros. But you need something to play on turn 1, and it's still a Modern Horizons card, so at the end of the day, it is powerful. But yeah, just kind of wanted to show you these really interesting and different takes on the Blink shell. You can do more than just Esper. Here we have Zerk in 23rd place. You might remember the names. Zerk played a ton of Yawgmoth quite some time ago. Haven't really seen Zerk's name pop up too much recently, but this deck list looks awesome. So the concept here is you're sort of this like, I don't know if anybody knows the deck in Legacy. I know that Legacy deck names are a little, they're out there sometimes. So I can't remember the name of the deck that I'm thinking of. It's like Cradle, I think it's Cradle Control. Basically, it's like the Elves players have sort of done this thing where they just cut all the Elf combo cards and they're just playing Green Sun Zenith, Natural Order, and then a bunch of green what-of like random like hate pieces and stuff. It's almost like a Death and Taxes style thing, where you can search up Collector Oof to shut off artifacts, you can search up Safekeeper to shut off removal, search up Ooze to shut off the graveyard. If you already have a Ghost Quarter to start blowing up lands, you can search up an Ice Till, and then Ice Till Ghost Quarter can sort of like, you can keep that loop going to run them out of basics. You can search up a Titania to make a huge battlefield presence. You can even search up Grist, which is a creature in your library for the Green Sun Zenith. And then kind of supplementing that, we have a ramp package of 4 Grazer and 4 Flare of Cultivation. Very powerful combination of cards because you can sacrifice the Grazer to cast the Flare for free. So turn 1 Grazer, put a land into play, then sack the Grazer for Flare, ramp, put a land in your hand. It gives you a huge mana advantage. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Some interaction like Thoughtseize, Murderous Cut, Fatal Push. Really clean looking deck list, and one that, I don't know, it's definitely different and something that we really haven't seen a lot of, this sort of like more toolbox style Golgari deck, but definitely one that you might want to give a try. And folks, last but not least, it seems that no matter what format we play, and you'll notice a trend in today's video, we cannot escape the menace that is VV and Cauldron, even when we try to not play Standard. And Katuo 079595 in 25th place here, this is VV, Cauldron, and Modern. I think this is pretty much the exact same list that Spike was playing. I want to say Spike had, instead of the second Trespass, a first Gristlebrand. I believe everything else was about the same, though. But yeah, this is more of just the highlighting. I'm not entirely sure if this deck is actually good. That is sort of, the jury's out on that one a little bit. but you do get some powerful upgrades in Modern, like Looting and Dragon's Rage Channeler, Mishra's Bauble. The Temporal Trespasses are pretty big too, and then Street Wraith to juice up your Marauding Makos and give you more creatures in the graveyard to get to trigger Cauldron and stuff like that. So time will tell whether or not this is actually a viable strategy in Modern, but I mean, when VV and or Cauldron gets banned in Standard, you gotta have something to do with them, right? And with all that, let us go ahead and take a look and switch over to Pioneer. And this is what Pioneer is looking like these days. Mono Red Mice, up a little bit from last week, 19.4 to 25%. Rakdos Demons took a bit of a fall here from 16 to 10. Phoenix, up a little bit. Mono Black, up a pretty big amount too. So it looks like maybe some of the Rakdos players just switched from Rakdos to Mono Black, given that sort of roughly about the same total percentage, just kind of split up a little bit differently. Angels down, Boros Convoke, about the same. Really not a ton of other movement outside of Mono Red, Rakdos, and Mono Black. I mean, I guess you could say Azorius Control, not really. Gruul Prowess up a little bit, but really not a ton of other movement outside of Mono Red, Rakdos, and Mono Black. But for what it is, the format, at least it seems pretty healthy. Yeah, there's a lot of Mono Red, there's a lot of Unholy Annex, but I think that the gameplay with both of those decks are pretty reasonable. They're both very interactive decks. Maybe Mono Red less so, but I don't know. Overall, I've been having a blast playing Pioneer, and if you guys want to see some more Pioneer content on the channel in the future, please let me know in the comment section. I promise when I say this, I read all the comments, so if you guys have any thoughts or any specific Pioneer decks you'd like to see me play, drop them in the comment section down below. But you know, I've been playing Pioneer a good amount on stream, and I've been loving it. I think Pioneer the gameplay is awesome. I've been having a lot of fun, and also got a little bit of spice to show you today. First one coming up from, I don't know if it's an L or an I, so I put an I there, but I-Z 25th place. This is Esper Pixie. Now, we took a look at a Pixie list, I think it might have been last week or the week before, that was a 60-card Pixie list, which looked very, very identical to what you may have seen in Standard prior to the banning of Hopeless Nightmare and This Town Ain't Big Enough. But this version is going a little bit bigger. If you count the cards, you'll notice that, yeah, it's more than 60, and that's because there is a Yorion in our sideboard. So Yorion may be the only format where, where you can actually still play it, competitive format at least. And I kind of like the way this looks, where you have kind of the Pixie stuff, right? 2 Nurturing Pixie, 2 Fear of Isolation, 4 Sun Pearl Kirin, along with The Town Ain't Big Enough. So you have 12 total ways to bounce plus the Yorion. And then Hopeless Nightmare, 4 Nowhere, some Momentum Breakers, 4 Storm Chaser's Talons, and then 4 copies of main deck High Noon, which is, it looks weird in this deck because since this deck's curve is so low, you kind of want to be playing multiple spells, especially when you're picking stuff off with the bounce stuff, right? Pixie, Kirin, and Town. So it's a little strange to see the High Noons, but what's really cool about High Noon with Yorion, and I want to highlight this, is if you have a High Noon in play, and then you pick up a Yorion, you can, I guess you would need a lot of mana for this, but you can cast the Yorion to blink the High Noon. It'll come back in your end phase. But the important part is that it's not on the battlefield for your turn. So you can play a bunch of spells, then get the High Noon back, and then continue to go from there, keep it in play on your opponent's turn. So, little cool synergy there. Some good interaction, Thoughtseize, 4 relics, because they work so well with all the bounce stuff. Fatal Push, Thoughtseize. So, yeah, some stuff that you would usually expect, but just kind of wanted to highlight this and show the differences between the 60-card version and the 80-card version. Well, we got some VVs in this list, but no Agatha's Soul Cauldrons. KTMR 39 finished in 12th place, with this take on the Retraction Helix Rona combo. So this is something that has been popping up a little bit over the past couple of months. I can't remember the person who initially played the mono blue version. I think it might have been Oaf McNamara. And they played the mono blue Helix version, and there's been a couple of people since the release of Final Fantasy that has been iterating and choosing to add VV and Cori-steel Cutter. Now, for folks at home who may not be familiar with the combo, it is Retraction Helix, which gives a creature you control the text of tap, return a non-land permanent, right? You give that text to Rona. Rona says when you cast a legendary spell, untap it. And then you pair that with, you guessed it, a 0 mana legendary spell, which allows you to effectively, well, I guess not with Jasper, but with Amber, you can make infinite blue mana, right? So you make infinite blue mana, you can eventually get to a spot where you can start cantripping. I think basically what happens is you eventually find a Flood Caller. You can cast the Flood Caller to pump it infinitely, and then use Cori-steel Cutter to give the Flood Caller haste. Or if you already had a Cori-steel Cutter in play, every time you're going through that loop, you're giving your trample token +1/+1. You can also kill them with VV Ping, so plenty of ways to win the game. But yeah, just like a whole bunch of cantrips, a bunch of cheap 1-mana spells. Flood Caller is also a combo piece because Flood Caller says when you cast a non-creature spell, birds, frogs, otters, and rats get +1/+1 and untap them. So if you Helix the Flood Caller, you can do the same thing with Amber and Jasper. And funny enough, you can also do it with Mutavault if you have a Flood Caller in play, because Mutavault is all creature types. So kind of in sort of a different take on the Helix deck, like Helix Rona combo, which we've seen before, but this one's got cutters and it's got some VVs, so looks pretty nice. And the last Pioneer deck I want to point your attention to is a deck that has been picking up a lot of steam over the past couple of weeks, and that is Spiciest in Pioneer. So Universe is the name of the person here, and I believe that Universe has been putting a lot of work into this deck list. So some of the numbers that you see here may be different than other lists that you may have seen, but basically the general concept is what you want to do is you want to get to a spot where you have a way to untap your lands. So you have 4 Spelunking and 4 Wandering Minstrel. You have one of those 2 in play. You then resolve a Spiciest. What happens is, say you have 4 lands in play. You can go get 4 Lotus Fields. The Lotus Fields untap, so they're untapped before you sacrifice. So you can float 12 mana, sack all your lands, get the fields back. And what ends up happening is that if you also can find a Port of Karfell in the Spiciest pile, so sometimes it'll be 3 Lotus Fields and a Port of Karfell, you can float 9 mana, or I guess 10 in this case, cast the Lumbra, get all the stuff back. And then the Port, you can actually tap 6 mana and sack the Port to mill 4 and then return back the Lumbra. So basically what ends up happening is it creates an infinite loop. Once you find, this list is actually not playing the mirror pool, so you do, I believe, need a second copy of Lumbra in the equation somewhere. But once you have a second Lumbra, you can eventually return the Lumbra and then legend rule to keep one of them. The other one goes back to the graveyard. You get back the Port, you loop that, you mill your whole deck, and then you eventually put a Thassa's Oracle into play. Because funny enough, the Port can return any creature. So the Port not only sets up your combo to mill yourself, but also just wins you the game with Oracle. A lot of ways to find additional lands. You got some cantrips like Stock Up. The version that I was playing also had Consult the Star Charts. There's some additional ramp here with Glimpse the Core, more ways to find Lumbra and or Aftermath Analyst, and I guess this can also find Minstrel. So the reason that I wanted to highlight this is because for those of you who don't know, we haven't had Crumbling Vestige on MTG Arena for a while, and it just recently got added. So with the addition of that to Arena, I've been playing a lot of this deck. And I like it. I like it a lot. I think it's pretty good. And that's definitely a change of pace from decks that I usually play in Pioneer. So there's the sideboard. And yeah, shout out to Universe for the Pioneer Spiciest deck. And now that we're done talking about Pioneer, let us get to the format that I know you all have been waiting for, Standard. So it turns out maybe there's more than one problem than just VV or Cauldron. I'm not entirely sure what happened. I took a week off. I mean, I guess it was already 34.8% last week, but we are approaching 40% territory for mono red, and it's just been going up every single week. I don't know what to say. I'm just at a loss for words. I mean, I was trying to think of something funny and smart and witty to say, but I don't really have anything for you. I'm just lost. I'm lost. I feel like, I mean, I guess you could say part of the reason that red is so high is it's like one of the few decks that actually can have a positive matchup against VV. So it's possible that once something is addressed from VV that the mono red numbers kind of decrease a little bit, but I'm a little skeptical of that. The red deck is, even sans Vivi, I think it's still extremely powerful. Turns out maybe banning Monstrous Rage and Heartfire Hero wasn't enough after all. But in any case, this is what the metagame looks like. Now, obviously, metagame maybe not looking the best, but there is still a little bit of spice to be had. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, shall we? And the first one here is from Gans87 in 16th place. So for those of you Oculus lovers out there, you may have forgotten about this card. This was, at one point, an extremely dominant deck in Standard. Sort of has been pushed out by the VV Cauldron Menace, and for a couple of reasons. One, at the end of the day, when you're putting creatures into the graveyard and utilizing spells that can either get them back, why would you not just be playing VV and Cauldron, right? You discard the VV, you Cauldron the VV. It's probably more powerful than putting an Oculus into play. On top of the fact that the VV Cauldron deck has 4 main deck Cauldrons, so kind of hard to resolve stuff like Helping Hand and Surprise Witness against the deck that has 4 Cauldrons. But with all of that said, I think this deck got some pretty significant upgrades, most important being Cosmogram Zenith. So traditional sort of just plain blue-white style Oculus decks have been begging for an additional good 3-drop for quite some time now. And I think Zenith is the perfect one, because if you can discard a Zenith to something like a Chart Course or mill it over with a Picklock Prankster, you can get it back for a single mana with Helping Hand, and then you have a lot more mana left over to be able to double spell. You could even Helping Hand back Zenith and then cast a second Zenith in the same turn, right? Because that's only requires 4 mana. So that is pretty nice. Alongside Riddler, Riddler might not look like a lot here, but there's a good amount of instants in this deck where you have Picklock Prankster and Get Lost, things like Into the Floodmaw, Spectral Denial. So you have a good amount of like ways to play at instant speed to kind of dump your hand and then set up a turn where you can have a Riddler in play, draw a couple extra cards like that. Kind of the 8 ways to mill over / discard with Chart and Picklock Prankster, the 6 reanimation spells with 4 Helping Hand and 2 Call of Surprise Witness. This is basically just recommissioned for all intents and purposes. Some Kioras, which kind of do double duty, where it's a creature you can return and allows you to discard. And there's the sideboard. So if you're into kind of the Oculus thing and you're maybe a little sick of VV, this could be a good sort of segue and something to give a try out to. Next up, we have Go Calper in 24th place. This is mono green aggro, but a very different take. We've seen plenty of mono green over the past couple of weeks, past month or so, honestly, at this point. And this one's a little bit different. So the card that you might be noticing here that's different, most different, is Leyline Axe, which is a weird card. It has the Leyline text, so if it's in your opening hand, you can start with it in play. And then it gives equipped creature +1/+1, double strike, and trample. Now, as you can imagine, mono green deck typically known for creating a bunch of creatures that have large power. So guess what? You're probably going to be surprised to hear this. When you give your creature with large power, double strike and trample, that's pretty good. Also, it's a free permanent that you can tap with Gene Pollinator, which is a mana dork, but it's a weird one because you need to have an extra permanent in play. But if you start with Axe and Pollinator, then it's effectively just another copy of Llanowar Elves, because you've now generated a situation where you have access to 3 mana on turn 2. So that's kind of cool. And then you can also pump the Ouroboros power with the Leyline Axe. Summon Fenrir's a bit of a strange one. I'm not sure I like this one, but it does allow you to put an additional counter on Ouroboros. And what's really nice about that is it enters with the counter, right? So the turn that you play the Ouroboros, this card typically weak to stuff like Abrade and Torch the Tower. But if it enters with the counter, then they don't have a window to torch or abrade it. You just get to go to combat, put 2 counters on everything, and then go ham. So definitely some very specific deck building choices here, and I think a lot of these make a lot of sense. But yeah, just if you want to try something a little bit different, maybe try Leyline Axe in your mono green deck. Next up here, we have the GOAT. It's Fire Shoes, 31st place. I want to see some W Fire Shoes in the comment section down below. So this is a red deck, right? And it's got some red cards: Hired Claw, Razorkin Needlehead, Screaming Nemesis, Burst Lightning. You've seen all those cards before. Cards maybe you haven't seen before are Shocking Sharpshooter, which is a 1/3 that says whenever another creature enters, it deals 1 to target opponent. Wefstalker Ardent, which is similar, but you can warp it for 1 mana. So you're pairing those cards with stuff like Voice of Victory and Stadium Headliner to make extra tokens. War Leader's Call also does a similar thing to Sharpshooter and Wefstalker. Now, the real kicker here is once you start pinging your opponent, what if you have an O'Hare in play? So every single time you would deal an amount of non-combat damage less than O'Hare's power to an opponent, you deal that damage equal to its power instead. So for example, if you have an O'Hare and any one of your damage outputs in play, Ardent, Sharpshooter, or Call, and you attack with Voice of Victory, the 2 tokens entering the battlefield each will deal 4 damage to your opponent. So they'll take 8 alone off of the trigger, and then presumably they'll probably be dead that turn. But you kind of see the vision here, right? It's like a little bit of a different take on mono red, the sideboard for posterity's sake. Also, what's nice about this is you do get to splash Sheltered by Ghosts because you're playing the white cards, and that, I would imagine, gives you a pretty significant edge in the mono red mirror match. So something to think about, and just a nice little different take on mono red from good old Fire Shoes. And my friends, we can't escape it. Now, I really wanted to end this video with this because I would love to hear your thoughts and your comments in the comment section down below. The people who don't know, Oaf McNamara, very accomplished player, did very well in Atlanta, I think has done well in some RCs, and has just been like tearing up and just like creating amazing deck list after amazing deck list. And Oaf has won a challenge this weekend with what I can only describe as post-ban is it, where Oaf said, you know what? Vivian Cauldron, everybody's complaining about these cards and people are saying they should be banned. I don't need them anyways. I'm just going to win a challenge without Vivian Cauldron. And it really makes you wonder, are we safe from is it after the bans that inevitably are going to take place on November 10th? Is part of the reason they're taking so long with their bans because they want to take other action than just what they mentioned, which was VV Cauldron. Maybe they hit something from red, maybe Profs, create something crazy like Profs needs to go. I don't know. But I gotta say, I played this deck list on stream yesterday. I went 9-1. It felt extremely, very powerful. But basically the concept is you're just taking all the good cards from VV Cauldron and you're replacing the VV Cauldrons with more interaction and some more threats. Nothing too crazy here. There's a Frostcliff Sage, which is a banger. Very good card with Riddler, because if you have Siege to give your creatures +1/+0 trample and haste, and you warp a Riddler, you paid 2 mana for a 5 power flying trample haster, which is pretty good. But yeah, Profs is absurd. This card is completely cracked, and this deck felt amazing when I played it yesterday, which was surprising. I thought this was more of a meme at first, and I thought it was only played to troll people. Just say like, haha, I can win a challenge without VV or Cauldron. And then I played it myself and I was like, oh no, this is just a good deck. So maybe we're not safe after November 10th. Who knows? And that, my friends, is going to do it for another episode of Watching the Meta. I thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of today's episode. And again, Pro Tour is going to be this weekend. I hope I get to see you there. Again, I'll be live streaming the Pro Tour coverage. So see you there. And with all of that, I will see you next week. Adios.